Will I ever learn to film while the sun is up so I don't have to play with all this lighting and make a big mess for myself? Nope. This is an intro. It was bad. Hi, hey, I'm Morgan, and today I'm going to be bringing you my November wrap-up. So, let's talk about November. Not the worst reading month of my life, but it was the best reading month because of quality. So I'm going to talk about these books that I read, talk about how I felt about them. First, I'm going to do stats. I'm consulting my reading journal for the stats because I like to put them in my reading journal and a spreadsheet, but I have quicker access to this than a spreadsheet on my computer. So in the month of November, I read 4 books, which amounted to a total of 1,792 pages. Dividing that by 30 days in November, I read roughly 60 pages a day. And in terms of rating, I rated all of these books 5 stars. So I had an average rating of 5 stars, which I'm super excited about. 2 of these books were rereads, and the other 2 weren't. 2 of them were listened to on audiobook, and the other 2 weren't. Now that I think about it, my rereads were listened to on audiobook, and the new to me books were physical. Interesting. Typically, I go in order from my lowest rated to my highest rated of the month, but I don't have to do that because these were all 5-star reads, so that's super cool. The first book I'm going to be talking about is Swallowtail by Brenna Twohy. This is a poetry collection. This is Brenna's first official publication. Brenna Twohy is one of my favorite spoken word poets, regular poet, just everything. I absolutely adored this collection. Some of my favorites in this collection were definitely The Fisherman Takes the Fish Home and Tells Her He Loves Her. I absolutely adore Neville Longbottom's Bogger Attends Severus Snape's Funeral. I think that is a phenomenal poem. And Conversations About Top Chef, if I had to list like my top 3 favorite poems from this collection. But if I'm being quite honest, no poetry touches me the way that Brenna Twohy's does, aside from Neil Hilborn, but he is my absolute #1 top favorite poet. But Brenna Twohy is a very close second. She's great, and she talks a lot about trauma, abuse, sexual assault, abusive relationships, getting out of those relationships. She talks an awful lot about anxiety, and as someone with anxiety, I just love feeling seen in the books that I read, and this just means a great deal to me. So I'm super happy to have read this month, and I loved it. It's a short, quick little read, so if you're looking for something to squeeze in at the end of the year for your Goodreads reading challenge, I always recommend poetry collections, but if you have the opportunity to pick up Swallowtail by Brenna Twohy, highly recommend it. The next one I'm going to be talking about is one of my rereads, and that is, of course, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. I read the first 6 books in October, and I finished out my reread of this series this month. I started it while in Florida and finished at the beginning of this month. This was the first book that I finished in November. I listened to it on audiobook. It was my first time listening to the entirety of the series audibly, and I really enjoyed it. I love Jim Dale's narration. It was such a great time, such a good romp. I love these books. They mean a great deal to me. I pretend that everything that J.K. Rowling is speaking into existence about the canon now just doesn't exist. Y'all hear something? So yeah, this is the 7th and final installment in the Harry Potter series. Pretty much my favorite series of all time. There's not much I could say about this. He's searching for some Hallows. The next one I'm going to talk about is borderline my most anticipated release of the year, and I think it's my favorite book of the year. Y'all know which one I'm going to be talking about. It's called On the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. Yup, this was obviously a 5 out of 5 star read for me. Certain things I definitely had issue with, but they were so minuscule to me and how I felt and my experience reading this book that I couldn't take it down like a whole star or even half a star, because my overall enjoyment factor of this book was like 10 out of 10. So if you're unaware, if you don't know, hi, The Raven Cycle, I have a whole shelf devoted to it, is pretty much my favorite series of all time in my adult life. Like, I will always love Harry Potter, the most. That was really important to me in my formative years, in my childhood. The Raven Cycle is to me now what Harry Potter was to me in my childhood, you know? And this is the first book in a spin-off series to the Raven Cycle. It's going to be a trilogy, the Dreamer Trilogy by Maggie Stiefvater, and it follows Ronan Lynch, my boy, and he's a dreamer. This is a story about the Lynch brothers. So Ronan has two brothers, Matthew and Declan, and it talks about their experiences with Ronan and about Ronan finding out more about himself and more about his father. I never thought I would give so much of a shit about Declan Lynch until I read this book. Like, I never hated Declan, but I was always kind of indifferent towards him in the books because obviously when you're in Ronan's head and in Ronan's POV during the Raven Cycle, it's hard to not like root for him and how he feels. Because of that, like the reader is developed to have this bias against Declan because he's just like a naggy older brother who treats himself to be like Ronan's parent. And when you're in Declan's POV in this book, it's like, well, yeah, how could he not view himself as that? Because of everything they've had to go through and what was placed on Declan's shoulders at such a young age, like, how could you not be that way towards your brothers, knowing everything that you know about your father and about your mother and about your life? This doesn't just follow the Lynch brothers, it also follows Jordan Hennessy, who is an art forger and maybe something a little bit more. It also follows Carmen Farouk Lane, who is part of an organization who hunts down dreamers, so people like Ronan. You can read this outside of the Raven Cycle. Like, that's the intention of this book, is that you don't have to read the Raven Cycle to read this, because everything that is important from the Raven Cycle that you need to know going into this is explained in this book. However, if you want to know the full extent of, say, Ronan's relationship to Blue, Gansey, Adam, I highly recommend reading the Raven Cycle first. I wouldn't suggest reading this and then reading the Raven Cycle. I feel like if you're gonna do both, do the Raven Cycle first, because then you get the full gravity of Ronan's feelings and the build-up of these friendships and the relationship. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I am hungry for more Pinch, but I liked that it wasn't super Pinch heavy, and I liked the tensity that was created. The tensity? The tense? I really loved it. I can't wait to reread it in like a month. And the last book I'm going to be talking about was obviously another reread, and was one that I listened to on audiobook, and that was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, and obviously I gave this 5 out of 5 stars yet again. This is the first book in the Six of Crows duology. I've never read Crooked Kingdom, and I waited, you know, like 3 years after reading Six of Crows, and then my brain was like, you know that one book that's a sequel that you wanted to read? How about you just read that? And I was about to pick up Crooked Kingdom, and then I realized, like, oh wait, I have both books on audiobook. This would be a phenomenal time to reread Six of Crows, experience the audiobook, and then read Crooked Kingdom for the first time. So that's what I'm doing. So this follows 6 super morally gray characters who are performing a heist. It takes place in Leigh Bardugo's Grisha world, though you don't have to read the Grisha trilogy to fully understand this book, but if you want more context, it's recommended. I haven't read the Shadow and Bone trilogy yet because I'm worried I'm gonna be one of those people that's horny for the Darkling, because I know who I am as a person. I'm Kaz Brecker garbage. I did a whole rant about this book, like a rave, not a rant, but the last time I talked about this book on my channel, I absolutely adored it. I love the representation of the characters in this. We have queer representation, we have disability rep from Kaz. It is Editing Morgan. I goofed up how I phrased that last sentence. I meant there's queer rep in another character, while also there's disability rep in Kaz. Not that Kaz is both disabled and queer, to my knowledge. Carry on. We have Fat Rep in Nina. We have Survivor of Trauma Rep from Inej. These are characters that aren't perfect and aren't cookie cutter wonderful, and they have baggage and they have flaws and faults, and they're ruthless and gray, and they would die for each other and they would kill for each other, and they fucking do. And I love these characters. I love this world. I can't wait to continue Crooked Kingdom. Yep, no mourners, no funerals, get out of my face. So there you have it, that is my short, sweet November wrap up. I thoroughly enjoyed everything I read this month. Even if I didn't read a large quantity of books, I read an abundance of quality books this month, and it makes my heart so happy, and it like drove me into December excited to read and ready to finish this month out strong. I think I'm 6 books away from meeting my Goodreads goal. So I'm really excited. I hope I can meet it. Let's see what I can do. But if you like this video, you're more than welcome to leave it a thumbs up if you feel so inclined. Leave me comments on what you read in the month of November, your favorite book of the month, your least favorite book of the month, how many books are you away from your Goodreads reading challenge. Let me know all of the things. And if you'd like to see more of my content and more of my mug, you are more than welcome to subscribe. I upload every Monday and Friday on this channel, and yeah, like I said, my name is Morgan. This is MorgyyReads. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and happy reading. Okay, bye! You guys like my nook? I'm a big fan. Welcome to my nook. That sounded gross. It's fine.